Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Growth Show. I'm here, sleep deprived, feeling more tired than usual, but being energized by the amazing Tom and David I have with me today. And we're going to do a 20-minute sort of sprint through a problem. So to set the scene, I'm very fortunate to deal with some amazing leaders, and a few in the last sort of month have come to me and they've been doing everything they can for their businesses, right? You know, bending over backwards for the team. And it's beginning to get to a point where it seems like the team just keeps asking for more and more and more and more and more and more. And there seems to be no context. And they are, frankly, just not enjoying running their own businesses, the stuff they've spent, 10, 15 years sort of building. So I wanted to pose a question today to you both on, I don't know if taking back control is the right way to phrase this, but let's call it taking back control. How as a leader do you take those sort of steps to, well, enjoying the job you're sort of doing, the thing you're sort of giving blood, sweat and tears to, but how do you take those first steps of maybe taking back control or the feeling of control that will make these people feel better? So very long scene setting there. So David, if that didn't make any sense, I'm happy to repeat it.
No, crystal clear.
What do you think?
I mean, it's such a hard one. It's such a fine line between really good empowering of people and sort of letting them take control, letting them, run their bit of it and giving them the autonomy and the freedom to do that. And them going a little bit into the Wild West and changing the flag and creating their own fiefdom. It's a very, very tricky sort of, it can be a very tricky sort of balance to really get. And I think a lot of leaders have that. There's things that they really like doing, there's things they like focusing on, to get other people to do other bits. They assume control and very quickly the sort of train's running away from them. So what it comes down to is a few things. This is the top don't, by the way. I'll start with that. So somebody the other day had a very similar problem. He got his entire senior management team into his office, and he screamed at them. I think shouted would probably be a better description. He shouted at them saying, "You have to be loyal to me. You have to do what I say. I'm in control. You're not in control. This is a toxic environment that you've created, and you're the biggest problem to the future of this business." If you want to make your position untenable, that is the best way to do it. If you have to tell people to respect you and listen to you, then you might as well start packing your box. So if you don't do that, so please, nobody do that. So if we don't do that, then what does it come down to? It mainly comes down to people's sort of motivations and drivers. What is it that's driving their behavior? There's lots of different metrics, lots of different tools for this. One of the things that I find quite interesting to reflect upon in these situations is that people are usually driven by one of three, maybe four different motivators. So they're either driven by power, so they want more power. They're motivated towards getting power, and they will avoid losing power. Great examples of this would be Margaret Thatcher. She'll assume more and more power. She'll put loads of people around her and say, yes, until you overextend your power. So when there's an absence of leadership, that's where power people will start to extend their kingdoms in all different directions. You then have some people who are just achievers. They just want to get their results. They're highly motivated towards winning, they'll move away from losing. So life is a binary game of winning and losing to them. And then the last group is you have affiliators who just like to keep balance. They like to keep harmony in a relationship. So they are often motivated towards maintaining a relationship and demotivated by losing a relationship. So if we start with that, is you probably have some of those characters on your team. So the affiliators, they're quite easy to change, because you can just talk to them about how their relationship is, how their behavior is damaging the relationship or what they're doing, and that you might not have as much control. You feel a bit disconnected from them and what they're doing. They will instantly start being motivated towards rebuilding that relationship. The achievers are probably not where your problem is going to come. There'll be secondary problems with relationship collateral damage in hitting their results that might have other impacts on the team, but they're probably not going to be your problem. Your main problem is going to be the power people. And so it's never going to be the whole team is the problem. It'll probably be one or two people will be influencing and changing the behavior of others. So find those people. I would put a pretty large amount of money on the fact that they'll be driven by power. And in the absence of leadership, there'll be power. The best corrective step is creating more accountability. So it slightly clips their power wings and the influence they have, but it doesn't take the power away. It just means they have far more accountability on what they're doing. And I think the lack of accountability is often where chaos soon pursues. So I think one of the key things would be get more accountability with the team, get more visibility on what people are doing, and then isolate the power people and assume some of that power back in a lovely kind of way.
Yeah, I think that's it's great. I think where you see the most frustrated people in this is where you see a founder, and you see a founder or leader of a team who is frankly killing themselves to sort of feed the people around them, right?
Yeah.
And and they're in that horrible situation where they can't just say, you have to say thank you, right? But I know it would mean the world to them if anyone on their team just went like, no, we really appreciate actually what you do, right? But as they're the leader, that just doesn't, it's a lonely job. It doesn't come their way. Tom, what would you add to what David was saying there?
Yeah, and I think what I'd say is it's very important to be clear, and wishy-washy sort of we'll try and resolve everything in a business context is utterly unrealistic, and businesses can only offer what they can offer, Nick, which is largely dependent on the challenge that they're facing, and that can change. I think the first point is, my comfort zone is arriving in situations which have been over-controlled, okay, to the point whereby people are totally switched off. And actually, I hand people back control. And the way I do that is, to figure out what they can do. And I don't put people into boxes like David does. I very much take an interest in them as individuals, and ask them questions, and I pretty quickly figure out what they can do, and then I get very clear, which pick up David's point around accountability, and give them opportunities to do things, and that's really when you begin to realise what people can and can't do, and that can be quite a unique experience in in a business. But that is not around taking too broad a perspective of things. It's really around what can the business offer. I think the second thing is then, if you imagine, I've got sort of a snake analogy, right? So you then got something to do. So, and that's not it's not a linear route. So you have to, it's a bit like a snake wiggling along. The challenge is, what's the sort of width of that snake and that's what the width of the boundary is. And so, within that, you've got to be very clear. And so there's three things that I do. One is I spend a lot of time confirming people's objectives, because people sort of wiggle along in their own little snaky way. And I spend a lot of time clarifying their objectives. You might think X, Y, Z is what you've asked people to do, but their perception of that can be quite different. Or I think the second thing was also to mentor people, to offer advice sometimes, although I try and avoid that at all costs. Third thing is really around coaching. In other words, coaching, in my view, is showing people that they can do it themselves. And I haven't found many people ever who cannot do something themselves. And then the last thing I'd add to that, which we've talked about a bit, is about acknowledging people for who they are, valuing them, and just taking interest in them. And then pretty much, Nick, you can get away with anything. And my role is really then maintaining the big picture. I look at how the program or whatever we've got to do fits together. What are the main junctures? What are the touch points, and who needs to talk to each other, because people do not naturally talk to each other, and then allow people to make decisions. And so, and then what I do is, if I don't like the sound of a decision, I'll ask questions, and I'll ask people, how does that affect Nick or David or whatever? So people begin to get an appreciation of the impact of what they're doing. I think there's then, in this particular environment, there's then the importance of informal, what I describe as being informal check-in, which is extraordinarily difficult. In this environment, being remote, it's very difficult. It's that time you sort of bump into people, or someone's fiddling around with something, or that's really important to understand how people are, but also to understand what they're struggling with. So that doesn't always happen in a review, but I rigorously put in reviews in terms of, and that's a sort of mini organisation in my view, of what's the vehicle to get us from A to B. And that's a collective of people to work together. So, and I think the corollary of that is an inclusive culture. And I ran a business quite a long time ago, actually, award-winning business. And I took it to being far more successful than it was in the first 6 months, and won some really high prestigious awards. And that was an awful, sort of inclusive culture, right? An inclusive culture is a killer culture, because what I've just said is clear, right? Or being clear on certain things, what the business can and can't do. But what really creates havoc and real unrest, which I think is what you were touching on, is this notion that you can consult on everything, Nick. It's an absolute killer. And people don't want that. It undermines clarity, it confuses people, it just panders to the weak members of the team. It just is disastrous. So I think, in a lot of situations, actually, you need to adopt a consult and decide approach, because most decisions, there are some winners and some losers, and somebody has to make a decision. And so I think there's sort of connotations around this inclusive culture, which goes well beyond what it should be, to quite a lot of what it shouldn't be. So I think within that, you've then got to be meritocratic as well. So I might like you, Nick, but I've got to be willing to upset you, right? For the sake of and I can switch style very comfortably. I can go from from being, someone might perceive me as being very close to them, and then I'll go bang. And we're going to be comfortable to do that as leaders. We've got to just completely switch style and really be able to pull people up if they need to, and just stop, just stop people in their tracks if you need to. A lot of people can't do that because they haven't got the confidence to do that. So, and I think within that, it comes back to the width of the snake thing. What's the width of that snake? And one of the things I did very early in my career, which is quite helpful, I think, actually, it's actually in a manufacturing business. People think manufacturing businesses are boring, but actually, no, they're ultimate teamwork. Because if you're going to get something off the end of a line, it's got to be right. And it requires a lot of different people to do that. And what I did was, a while ago, and it's quite a useful analogy, when I was in my early 20s, actually, I took a snapshot of what everybody was doing, Nick, right? Everybody on a factory floor. So, right, just tell me, and I recorded everything that they were doing versus what the schedule was, okay? So what were they actually doing versus the schedule? So I had this customer schedule that I had to deliver on a monthly basis. And if I didn't achieve it, I'd get quite badly kicked. In the good old days in British manufacturing, you get pretty hit pretty hard. And you'd end up getting loads of overtime at the end of the month trying to get this stuff out the door. And it was just unnecessary, because if you planned from the word go, it'd be a whole lot easier. And in this snapshot, and I think this is fairly typical actually, I found that about the 30% of what people were doing was actually achieving against the target, whatever that target was for that month. And the rest of them were actually quite well-intentioned bits of rework. So sometimes you might be waiting for information, or waiting for a part, or you're not trained to do something and you're waiting, there's all these sorts of things that are going on which are stopping you from doing. And we've talked quite a lot around the psychology in previous things, and jazz bands and things, which I won't touch on, but that's quite a useful exercise, I think, to do actually. And I encourage you to do that, Nick, in your organisation. Just take a snapshot, like a balance sheet. It's not the P&L, it's the balance sheet. It's that snapshot. What are people doing versus the target? And just say, well, why are you doing it? And that's quite an interesting check. And I think the other thing I think we should recognise in this type of environment, we have to be very respectful. And actually, I think this is almost going over the top in terms of preventing putting people into boxes. So people don't fit into boxes. So I challenged David a bit on his, it's a hypothesis in terms of, because it's nice because it creates certainty, but actually people really don't fit into those boxes. And I think the more we think like that, the more trouble we can get into. Whilst I like the analogy, David. So I think it's very much around, acknowledging that people actually in this environment are very stressed, and actually in that situation, they don't receive information correctly. They malfunction. They might look okay, but they might be tired like you or me. I'm quite tired as well. So, I think it's, and out of that, I think you the best place I think to be as a leader is to acknowledge that you are pretty broken. You're pretty fallible. You don't know all the answers. You're entirely reliant on your team. And I think that's sort of what good looks like and what getting control looks like. It's about handing back the control. And they're the things that because I can flick a switch and get control of a business in a couple of days, Nick. This is what I do. But it's a lot about, my mindset. It's about having the right perspective of people, acknowledging that, accepting them who they are. And they tell me things, very, very humanistic type things, but there is some structure behind it. But it's about 95% people, heart for people, and 5% structure.
Right. That was great. It was loaded there. David, so the picking up on one of the things Tom's just said there, the sort of bravery to stop people and sort of tell them what's going on. If you're fundamentally a leader who is unhappy because of the team around you, right, or the culture that maybe you've created, I think most of those leaders would be very nervous to tell people they are unhappy, right, through it coming across as weakness or undermining them. I know we all talk about that sort of honest, authentic approach, but is that a place to start? Actually, just telling the team, like, look, I want to let you know what I'm actually going through on this. This is how I feel about the sort of constant requests.
These questions can be quite hard to answer without kind of specific context of what someone's going through. But as a general principle, I think, again, this is my opinion. I would always steer people away from sounding whiny, because all the people are coming to you and saying, I need this, then it's almost turning back on them saying, well, I need this. And then that can polarize people a bit more. I think it's probably to use that as a way to build empathy, where you could say, look, I found the last 3 months, 6 months, 6 days, 6 minutes, whatever it is, of running the business, challenging. And there's a lot of things in there. There's COVID, there's the disconnect with people, there's the challenges of changing markets, all those things. And I found that really challenging. And it's coming to a point where, there are bits of this that I haven't enjoyed as much. And part of that is being around the team and knowing a bit more about what you do, what you're doing. And it might be that you found that as well. Because I imagine that as soon as you start talking about it, probably quite a few people on the team will go, yeah, I found it really tough as well. And that might then start a conversation that helps kind of understand where they're at and where they're coming from, as well as where you're coming from. I think with anything like this, you've got to start with the end point in mind. And so, what would be your outcome of saying that? What's the positive intent of saying to people, I'm sick and tired of your moaning? It's very easy to do that bit. It's harder to then go, okay, so what do I want to do with that? Where's that going to go, and what sort of, where's the destination? And presumably the destination is getting people back into a really good team environment. So we're talking about what the team environment would be good and where people are finding challenges at the moment. That might be a really good starting point to then kind of spark that conversation. Because it might well be that they're not happy and they're not, over the moon of the last few months as well. And that'd be a great chance for everyone to go, right, well, how do we change it? As opposed to, I'm fine, you all need to change how you interact with me to make my life better.
Yeah. No, I think that's I think that's a good point. And Tom, when around the sort of courage piece, is there a point of just sort of resetting a framework? Because what it sounds to me when people talk to me about that control, it's if people don't know what they can operate with, what space they can operate within, there's no boundaries to what they can sort of ask, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So is a big part of this as a leader just going, look, we work within this space right now because of these reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We can maybe revisit this at this sort of time. Is that an approach?
Yeah. No, I think, and it relates to what David just said. I think whinging is when people are actually, there's something I forgot to mention. There's quite a few things that I do that are pretty natural to me, but when I'm talking about boundaries, I'm actually talking about giving people resources, Nick. And very often, and I'll give you an example. I mean, in the sort of situations and turnaround, you have no resources, Nick, right? So I can say to you, actually, I want you to fix this problem, Nick, but there's no money to fix it, right? It's up to you to fix it. And that then gets your head in the right place. If you come back and ask me for money, so look, there's no money to fix it. What part of that don't you understand? I wouldn't say that, but, you know. Well, I might actually if it's you, Nick, actually, but you know, that's what I mean by being, and I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes unstuck, where people sort of, or they're waiting for something. A lot of people that I work with are waiting for something, you know, or they want this to do that, and so you need to create it yourself, you know. And there's that sort of stuff, and I just nip that in the bud because I make it very clear in terms of what I want people to do. And I give you an example of that. Now, I had a really quite a well, extraordinarily imperfect situation where all kinds of issues, I mean, just off the planet. And I just was really clear about what I wanted them all to do. And I said, look, this is what you've got. The guy with the materials had 25 grand to spend on the materials to get £600,000 worth of product out in 2 weeks, right? That's his job. No more money, that's it. Finance director, you've got to negotiate with the HMRC, you've got to do da-da-da-da-da. That's how it fits. There are your objectives, how you do that. And I'll support you. I know how to know how to have discussions with the HMRC. So there's not as though you're leaving people high and dry. Production director said, look, I need to get this work out the door. You need to organise a staff, right? Up to you. You sort it out, come back. And then we get together and report on this, right? Because, and I think, and the last thing, Nick, as well, is I just add, is not to take yourself too seriously.
You've mastered that with that hat. That's extraordinary.
My wife has found this ridiculous hat, and I know that's a big mistake. Actually, we do take ourselves too seriously. In all seriousness, you know, we've got to have humour. We've got to, you know, show weakness ourselves, and we're going to have a bit of fun. Because if you're not, you're just simply not approachable, right? So you might create this utopian structure, and you've ticked all the boxes, you've done all your assessments, which I tend not to do. But a lot of it's just giving people the opportunity and saying, look, you can do it. Now, if you get stuck, come and tell me. And the only thing that people could ever do, right, is having made it clear. You know, I might have forgotten something, which is quite often, as you well know. But you know, if someone says, look, Tom, I can't do this, you know, I do want to know. And people have to be able to come to me whilst I can turn up the heat and I can be a bit scary. Actually, I know how to wind that back and, you know, to actually still make sure that I'm being clear, but also approachable, Nick. And I genuinely think approachability and approachability is largely around just making sure that you're not infallible. A lot of people, what I do in turnaround, just come in, you know, like John Wayne, and no one speaks to them. And you know, the people the bank put in, I rarely even speak to. They put finance directors in. I rarely even speak to them. It's disastrous. So, you know, it's extraordinary how you know, when you get the communication right, how you can deliver results with a very, very imperfect set of people. And as long as you don't think you're any different, that's great. The minute you start thinking you know better, and we've talked about that, Nick, as well as part of the humorous growth show series, or reasonably humorous growth show series.
Yeah. Thinking I know better is not a problem I have.
Yeah. Well done.
Pride myself being dumbest in the room, which is great.
Yeah.
So David, just to conclude on that, coming back to a few of the points Tom made, there's a bravery aspect, right? So anyone who doesn't like confrontation, I think this is a whole new episode, by the way, so I'm teeing you up maybe more for next week than to answer this now, but the bravery piece, to stand up and be accountable, is a lot easier said than done. And the other thing I thought, which Tom just said there, which again we should aspire to do, but is again easier said than done, is being calm and trying to relax in super highly pressured situations, especially for people who might be encountering the first time. You know, the writing might be on the wall for certain people, and they're like, right, this is it. And it might be, you know, shall we bring in a breath coach or someone, or a hypnotherapist to sort of talk us through that. So I would be keen to go into that bravery element and go into that calm, relaxed element. Is that something you'd be happy to talk about?
Yeah, very happy to.
Perfect.
Right now, generally.
Yeah, I don't think right now. I don't think right now, because I do think it's
they're massive topics.
Yeah, exactly. Like trying to just say, oh, quickly, just tell us how to chill out in 5 minutes in incredible stressful situation seems to be shortchanging people a little bit there. But is there on this topic of sort of taking back control, from anything Tom said, is there any sort of final point from you on that you'd like to share with people?
I think it would possibly be people make the best decisions with the information available to them at the time. So I think if you're getting to the point where you're like, oh, my team's disastrous, they're doing all the wrong things, but I'd probably pause and say they're doing the best that they can with the information, the knowledge, the resources, whatever it is that they have around them at that time. So I would look at that first. I would look and go, well, actually, this is what they're going to do in these situations. That is what it is. Maybe I've got a different perspective, or they've seen something different to what I can see. So the behavior isn't the person. You've got to really separate those two things out. And so they might have behaviors that you find annoying or frustrating or make you not want to work with them or whatever, but that's not them as a person. They're two very distinct things. So I think it's helpful to remember that the behavior is a symptom of what they've been programmed with, their experience or whatever else, and it's not them as a person. So it'd be good to sort of think of them as a person and how you interact with them as a person, and not react to their behavior.
Perfect. I've loved this chat. I mean, I've given you both zero context to try and work with it, so I think you've done exceptionally well. One of my takeaways from this today is where David was putting people into, I think Tom used the word boxes. Okay, I think it's a sort of loose term there. And obviously Tom talking about a different style. I think what's so useful for everyone actually listening into this is that if you're lost in this, the boxes thing is a great starting point, right? Like, at least you've got a bit of clarity on like a different tactic before you sort of move on to what Tom's saying. And I think the blended approach, and why we have everyone together to discuss this, the blended approach is first class. Yeah. But I think a bit like everyone's different styles, something's going to resonate more with someone to start, and the key thing we're trying to help people do is start.
Yeah.
And that's why I think these are great conversations.
Just one quick thing on that, Nick. Just one quick thing on that. And when people are stressed, okay, boxes are very dangerous because you can't get out of boxes, right? Because it's a generalization. So I love David dearly, and I've got a lot of time for everything that we've said here, but it's just worth recognizing that boxes that can be very, very problematic, and people don't actually fit in those boxes. It tends to be somebody else's assessment of it. But in terms of the calmness, I think that comes down to purpose, and we touched a bit upon that, Nick, last week. When you're under fire, when you're really under fire, I really come under fire from lots of different directions because I'm really in a situation where I feel utterly out of control. Sometimes when I first start, it comes down to your purpose. It comes down to if you get hit, Nick, like a weeble, what makes you bounce back up again? What makes you get out of bed? Because I'm in the thick of it as well. So I think anyway. I don't want to steal the thunder. I think the courage thing's a brilliant one, and calmness. But
yeah. I mean, gosh, turnaround is the definition of being thrown in thousands of people not knowing who you are. That is intense, right? That's about as intense as it gets, and everyone just sort of scared of who you might be to start with is always an aspect there. But well, I'll take some notes and let's talk about that sort of bravery or calmness aspect. They might be two different topics in themselves, but I think right now, especially going into 2021, or by the time this is aired, it might be 21. If so, Happy New Year, everyone. Then that would be a great topic to sort of deep dive into until we come through. Tom, David, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed that. That was great. Hope everyone at home on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Spotify. If you haven't got us on Spotify, get on Spotify. I hope you all enjoyed that, and we look forward to doing many, many more of these, and hope that there's some value. Any questions you want to pose, write in either on the LinkedIn group or below in the comments, and we'll do everything in our power to come back to you. Otherwise, thank you so much for your support, and we'll catch up again soon. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.